Hey everybody, it's Dr. Jensen. Welcome back to Media and Crime. And this is one of our last lectures for Module 1, so you've come to the end. And this is Part 7 of Social Constructionism, Crime, and Justice. So we're going to be kind of wrapping up a lot of what is presented in Surrett, Chapter 2. So first we're going to go through the concepts of social construction, like claims and claims makers, frames, narratives, symbolic crimes, and ownership. So we'll make this a little more clear because a few of these aren't well described in the text, so I thought I would use this lecture to elaborate on that a little bit and make it easier for you. So first, the claims and claims makers concept. Essentially, a claim is an assertion about facts and how to interpret them. So we have factual claims purport to describe the world and reality, and then we have interpretive claims, which are statements about what the events actually mean. So you kind of have one that's a fact and one that's a judgment or an opinion. So interpretive claims can offer an explanation of the facts and why there is a problem, or they can offer a course of action or suggest a policy to deal with the problem. One little suggestion I'm going to make at this point in time, you will have a paper that you'll be writing about gun policy soon in this class. Using factual claims and interpretive claims will be very, very helpful to you in writing this paper. So write that down, take a few notes, and refer back to that when you get ready to write it. And it's kind of back here in the first module, but you'll want to review that and utilize those concepts in your paper before you start writing. So a little hint for the future. Additionally, with claims and claims makers, a claim maker is the person, right? The promoter, the activist, the expert, a spokesperson, and sometimes a celebrity who asserts a position on some kind of social condition or event. So again, we kind of call this stage one. Some scholars refer to these as moral entrepreneurs or moral crusaders, and claims makers really go beyond the facts and give interpretations, and they also take their own actions as well. So claims makers really can operate at different levels. They can be solo or in concert with others, as in a coalition, maybe starting a nonprofit group or a movement. They can be individuals, like a citizen letter to the editor, an opinion editorial, or organize some kind of campaign where they're really acting in their own self-interest, but they're trying to collaborate across a group. Or they can become an organized group, and some examples are the NRA, where people felt that gun training and gun ownership was really important, so let's create an organization about that. Or the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. These are examples of organized groups that have an interest in a certain kind of topic that they want to engage in. So claims makers really have different prospects of success in progressing through stages of social constructions. Prestige and social status helps, so if you're more well-known, you get more of the bandwagoning effect where everybody wants to rally and jump into your cause. And there's a degree of organization and sophistication of a group that helps. So if you have some legitimate business behind you that's, has some administrative and logistical capability, that's useful. With claims and claims makers, you have the role of linkages in claims and claims making. So this can be enhanced if the particular construction can be linked to other broader constructions that are already established. So it can be a really winning strategy. If we already know that cocaine is a dangerous drug, then looping stories about violence and crack babies can be used to construct the idea why we need extra harsh sentences for crack users. So you take one construction about, a conception about crack being dangerous, and then you add it to another meaning or cause that you want to promote. Okay, so that's kind of what we're talking about when we say you can kind of link them together, because you take the believers in this and just extend them to be believers in that. We also have what we call the frame concept of constructionism. So when we say frame, a frame is a fully developed social construction template that allows users to categorize and label and deal with a wide range of real-world events to kind of keep track of them. It's really an organizational strategy, really. These frames incorporate factual and interpretive claims inside of them, and sometimes they're side by side. They also organize your experiences, your feelings, your knowledge or values, and etc. really into a more or less coherent conceptual scheme that you can kind of hang your hat on. Okay? So essentially that's kind of how it works. When we look at frames as well, I want you to refer to table 2.1 in the Surratt text. You'll see crime and justice frames in there, and you'll see, ones that are featured in media. They're really not mutually exclusive of each other. You'll see overlap in these. All have really garnered some public support where they land quite well. And you'll also see the 5 frames presented. You see the faulty system, blocked opportunities, social breakdown, racist system, and violent media. And we're actually going to talk about each of these 5 and give you some examples. So an example of the faulty system frame that people subscribe to are that different groups really used the Newtown school shooting in 2012 differently to exemplify a faulty system. So it might be who gets guns is faulty, so now we should stop the gun show sales loopholes. Or maybe the treatment of the mentally ill is very poor. It's a faulty system, so we need to improve mental health. Or maybe it's school security is really lousy and ill-equipped, so that faulty system begs to arm teachers or put cops in schools or security teams. So this is kind of indicative of a greater problem going on that's very systemic. Then we have an example of the blocked opportunity frame. So, for example, 47% of voters who would vote for Obama because they were takers, who saw themselves as victims, who wouldn't take responsibility for themselves and were dependent on government. So they were kind of pushed into this, we want a candidate because we want more intervention, we want more free handouts and so forth. The only way to open up their opportunities is to return to market competition rather than government programs. And so this kind of plays into social strain theory if you've had criminological theory class. When we say blocked opportunities, we really talk about limitations of how people don't have access to the things they need to be successful and kind of build themselves and their livelihoods. So essentially where you get these competing frames about the welfare system, about poor people not having access to what they need, and so forth. You also have the example of the social breakdown frame. This one's kind of interesting. So our schools are broken and contribute to delinquency. They're not managing behavior properly. We could solve the problem if we only returned to prayer in schools, or for other people, corporal punishment. So they note how others used a failed school as a frame for a blocked opportunity, and that their students there cannot get ahead and they're likely to turn to crime. So you actually have a few kind of competing and overlapping frames here, blocked opportunity and social breakdown. But social breakdown kind of talks about just social order not doing its job and maintaining control over behavior and people. Then you have the racist system frame. So again, you might want to refer back to the view in the Trayvon Martin case that the police did not investigate thoroughly because of racism. You subscribe to these ideas, that the shooter was not arrested because of racism, that one solution was to force out the chief of police, and so you have kind of all these ideologies going on in your head, and it creates this overall frame that you kind of defer to when you see similar cases. And then finally we get the violent media frame, and again we'll talk about the Newtown school shooting and other mass shootings. They must be more likely because of violence in games, music, media, movies, television. And this also gets influenced by other shootings, like the Columbine shootings, especially when the 2 perpetrators of that violence were found to have listened to kind of hateful music and shoot 'em and were subscribed to shoot 'em up video games and blah, blah, blah. Suddenly there was an outcry that must be what caused this shooting. It's violent media. So we really need to regulate violence in the media. Here's a little teaser for the future. We are going to examine this question, violence in the media, and look at the research and what the research says about these ideas. So you'll get a better answer to this question. Does violent media actually cause or correlate with violent behavior? So it's fun to finally get answers to questions maybe that we've had for a long time. So I'm going to tease you a little bit and say that that answer is coming in future modules. We have a few other things to talk about here, though. The narrative concepts that Surratt talks about. So this is the one particularly where I didn't feel like the Surratt text definition is very clear. So think of a narrative as a crime and justice portrait, or a stereotype that caricatures a recurring presentation of situations and people that can be applied to specific events. So it kind of gives us little character portraits to work with. So, Ebenezer Scrooge is a way to capture a miserly, cynical ascetic who loves money for the sake of money, that rather than any other pleasure that it can help secure. They're money-oriented. So this is the caricaturizing of people in media. So narratives exist in culture. There's a very ready repertoire out there for people to draw from. And they do have some social support so that people can recognize the characters they see. They can also give some constructions an edge in the competition because of that familiarity or support. Now we have this kind of active simile or storyline to go with, and it feels very personal to us. We identify with it very easily, and it's not a stretch of the imagination to use those ideas, and so it's very effortless. Media really play an important role in creating them, maintaining them, and making them available to other people. So in your text on page 41, there's a few more examples of common crime and justice narratives, like the private investigator, the rogue cop, the sadistic guard, a corrupt lawyer, a greedy businessman, those kinds of things. So these are the caricatures that we're talking about, that you see played out over and over again. And there are just thousands more. These are just a few examples. Well, finally, we get into the symbolic crime concept of constructionism. So when we say symbolic crimes, these are select crimes or justice events highlighted by claims makers as perfect examples of their construction and as reasons why their construction should be accepted by everybody. And these are often that Walker's wedding cake model, celebrated cases as sources of most symbolic crimes, especially when they're so pervasive and widely known. And they're really used to show the extent of threat and a need for policy. Symbolic crime also uses a formula for your claim. So you basically find the very worst, the most dramatic crime event you can possibly find. You link your construction or your agenda or your ideas to that dramatic example. This will get you more coverage and it'll give you an edge in the competitive arena. And this actually happened with the Lindbergh baby kidnapping as an example. And you're going to read more about this in some other chapters too. But that one is worth a good Wikipedia trip to look up the Lindbergh baby kidnapping. We also have the ownership concept of constructionism. And we're kind of rounding out this lecture now to finish off on a few concepts. Hopefully I haven't gone too fast, but I realize you can back me up and fast forward me and I'll never know. And so when we talk about ownership, we're talking about the identification of a particular set of claims makers who come to dominate the social construction of that issue. So here's a few examples, like MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, the NRA and things like gun rights. And so they kind of become the owners of those ideas. So note that ownership usually means the advocacy at an organized group level, giving an edge in the competition and having their own kind of ways to communicate with everyone. And ownership also implies the role of the moral entrepreneur or the moral crusader, that the whole organization is going to be behind this. And then again, just in closing, there are some really good examples of social constructions in the Surratt text, and these could be very helpful for future papers. So Surratt talks about road rage, about drunk driving or driving under the influence, and the arrest of Rodney King as social constructions and how they all played out with themes and frames and all these kinds of things. So give them a brief read, and then that'll really equip you to be able to recognize these as you go forward in the class and as you see them play out in the entertainment and media and news you consume. So hopefully this has helped with Module 1, and we'll see you in the next module, Module 2. Over and out.